Good evening, children. I hope you all are fine by the grace of God. Yesterday, we started to learn a lesson about a girl named Jane Louise Finch, and she was around 6 years old. And what happened in her life, she's trying to tell us. What we saw yesterday that Jem, her brother, they both are coming to check on their father, Mr. Atticus Finch, and he's a lawyer. What happened when he was waiting, sitting in the room, and four cars are coming, and men are coming out of the car, and they are coming to him, and they are checking on him about a man. And we also know that Tom Robinson was protected by Mr. Finch. So they wanted to come and harm, like they wanted to take that man, beat him up, and attack him. And he's protecting, saying, "Please go back. You can turn around and go home again, Walter." Atticus said pleasantly, that is very softly, Heck Tate is around somewhere. That means what? The sheriff is around here. I'll inform him. I don't want you all to harm this man. The hell he is. Like that, these men are angry. All these men are shouting at Finch. So they wanted to harm. They're telling, "Move away. We wanted to get on him." And Heck's bunch so deep in the woods they won't get out till morning. Indeed, why so? Call them off on a snipe hunt was the succinct, succinct answer. Succinct means to the point, very to the point. They gave the brief answer. Did you think about that? Of that? A that means of that, Mr. Finch. Thought about it, but didn't believe it. Well, then, my father's voice was, who is telling this to us? Scout. Okay. Voice was still the same. That changes things, doesn't it? It do. That means it does. Another deep voice said it. Its owner was a shadow. Do you really think so? This was the second time I heard Atticus ask the question in 2 days. And it meant that means the man who is been accused is falsely accused. So he is not able to believe. He is telling that man would not have done that crime. That's why he's asking the question. Do you really think so? This was the second time I heard Atticus ask that question in 2 days, and it meant somebody's man would get jumped. That means somebody would get into trouble. This was too good to miss. That means what? She really wants to know what's happening around. You all can imagine, isn't it? They were sneaking, they were standing by the hardware door, and they were trying to see what's happening. So, what she did, she broke away from Jim and ran as fast as I could to Atticus. She ran to her father. Jem shrieked and tried to catch me, but I had a lead on him and till. That means she went ahead of her brother's friend and her brother. Ran very fast. I pushed my way through dark, smelly, that is the sweat, dirty smell, and burst into the circle of light. "Hey, Atticus!" she went and called her dad. I thought he would have a fine surprise, but his face killed my joy. That means he gave the way he looked at her, her happiness faded away. A flash of plain fear was going out of his eyes. That means what? He actually is frightened. He is worried that number one, these men have come to harm that man who he is protecting. Second, and these are all very rough looking men, and he doesn't want these men to hurt his son and daughter, but returned when Dil and Jem wriggled into the light. So, following Jane, these two, her brother and the friend, also came into the circle. When I glanced around, that means when she looked around, I discovered that these men were strangers, they were not the people I saw last night. Hot embarrassment shot through me. I had leaped triumphantly into a ring of people I had never seen before. She thought at least one or two people, some neighbors, she knew them. But after she entered in, she could not, she doesn't know any of them, all are strangers. So she felt very embarrassed, like shy, shame. Atticus got up from his chair, but he was moving slowly like an old man. He put the newspaper down very carefully, adjusting its creases with the lingering fingers. They were trembling a little. His fingers were shivering. Go home, Jem, he said. Take Scout and Dill home. So the Atticus was telling to his son to go home. We were accustomed to prompt, if not always cheerful, acquiescence. Acquiescence. That means usually they used to obey the father immediately. Happily they will obey. But this time, Atticus is not listening to the instructions. But from the way he stood, Jem was not thinking of budging. So Jem was not planning to move away from the crowd, from that situation. Go home, I said. The father is telling again, go home. Jem shook his head. He said, no. Like we will say, no, left to right. No. That is saying no. As Atticus' fists went to his hips, so did Jem's, and as they faced each other. See, a fist, his hand is keeping on his hip when you get angry to show that, go, like that, no? He too is, father is doing, son also is doing the same thing. I could see little resemblance between them. Like they are not looking alike. Why? Jim's first soft brown hair and eyes, his oval face and snug fitting ears were our mother's. So he looks more like the mother, contrasting oddly with Atticus' graying hair, black hair, and square cut features, but they were somehow alike. So, outwardly they are not looking alike, but their mannerism, their attitude is mutual defiance made them alike. That means mutual defiance means their resistance towards each other, tolerance towards each other made them look they are alike. Son, I said, go home. So Atticus is telling, son, I said, go home. Jem shook his head. He said, no, I'll send him home. A burly man. A burly man means we can say like a rowdy, no? We can say very tall, very strong, very rough, like that man. What that man did, he grabbed Jem roughly by the collar. He yanked. He was lifting this boy above the floor. So what this girl did, don't you touch him. She got very angry when that man lifted her brother. So, what she did, she kicked the man swiftly. Immediately, she kicked him. Barefooted, I was surprised to see him fall back in real pain. When she kicked, she did not realize that he is going to fall, but he fell down. Why, you know? She intended to kick his shin. Shin is the place in your body, in our body, between the knee and the feet. Okay, that is called shin, and but aimed too high. So she kicked him above the thigh, his legs. That will do, Scout. Atticus put his hand on my shoulder. So father came and he told the daughter to stop. Don't kick folks. Means don't kick people. No, he said as I was pleading justification. What justification she wants? She's telling, how come that man harm my brother like that? Ain't nobody gonna do Jem that way, I said. All right, Mr. Finch, get them out of here. Someone growled. That means in a rough voice. You got 15 seconds to get them out of here. So that man was shouting. In the midst of this strange assembly, Atticus stood trying to make Jem mind him. I ain't going, was his steady answer to Atticus. Atticus, what he was doing? He was threatening, he was requesting, and finally he was telling, please, Jem, take them home. By looking at all this, I was getting a bit tired of that. But felt Jem had his own reasons for doing as he did. In spite of their father's request, threat, pleading, Jem is refusing to leave the place. Why? Jem want to protect his dad from these men. And what happens next? In view of his prospects, once Atticus did get home, I looked around the crowd. It was a summer's night, but the men were dressed, most of them in overalls and denim shirts buttoned up to the collars. I thought they must be cold natured, as their sleeves were unrolled and buttoned at the cuffs. Some wore hats pulled firmly down their ears. They were sullen looking, that means angry, sleepy eyed. They were angry, they were sleepy eyed, and who seemed unused to late hours. I sought means she was searching for once more for a familiar, if any, known men around there. And at the center of the semicircle, I found one. So she found one man she knew. Hey, Mr. Cunningham, she called him. The man did not hear me, it seemed. That means he heard his name, but he pretended as if he didn't hear. Hey, Mr. Cunningham, how is your entailment getting along? So she was talking. Mr. Walter Cunningham's legal affairs were well known to me. Atticus had once described them at length. The big man blinked and hooked his thumbs in his overall straps. He seemed uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and looked away. Like that, he cleared his throat and he looked away. My friendly overture had fallen flat. That means the way she was trying to make friendly and talk, that failed. Mr. Cunningham wore no hat, and the top half of his forehead was white in contrast to his sun-scorched face. That means sunburnt face, which led me to believe that he wore one most days. That means usually you wore the hat most of the days. He shifted his feet clad in heavy work shoes. So he just moved. Okay. And don't you remember me? So she's trying to develop the conversation. Mr. Cunningham, I am Jane Lewis Finch. You brought us some hickory nuts one time. Remember? I began to sense the futility one feels when unacknowledged by a chance acquaintance. That means futility means useless. She was trying to make him understand that she knew him and he knew her, but it's useless. That man is not showing any interest. I go to school with Walter. I began. Again, she's developing the conversation. He's your boy, ain't he? Ain't he, sir? That means, or not. Okay. Mr. Cunningham was moved to a faint nod. He did know me. After all, after this girl trying to talk so much, that man had to move his head up and down. That means, yes, I know, like that. He's in my grade. So she's continuing to talk to him about his son, Walter. He's in my grade. That means your son and myself, we both are studying in the same class, I said. And he does right well. He is a good boy. I added, a real nice boy. We brought him home for dinner one time. Maybe he told you about me. I beat him up one time, but he was real nice about it. Tell him hey for me, won't you? So she's trying to say hello. When you go home, say hello. And that until that time she did not realize that all the men are around, her father is there, what the tension situation that was. She didn't realize all these things. Atticus had said it said it was the polite thing to talk to people about what they were interested in, not about what you were interested in. So he has, for her father has already told her, when you talk to someone, you talk to the people what they are interested in. You don't be going and talking to them what you are interested in. Okay. So Mr. Cunningham displayed no interest in his son. So she noticed that he is not happy about the topic. So I tackled his entailment once more in a last ditch effort to make him feel at home. Entailments are bad, I was advising him when I slowly awoke to the fact that means only now she is realizing I was addressing the entire aggregation, the people gathering. The men were all looking at me. Some had their mouths half opened, and Atticus had stopped poking at Jem. So he was going on begging Jem, go, go, go. So he also stopped that. They were standing together beside Dil. Their attention amounted to fascination. Atticus' mouth even was half open. Even he was shocked and listening to the conversation, the way the girl was talking. An attitude he had once described as uncouth, that means crude and unrefined. Our eyes met and he shut it. Well, Atticus, I was just saying to Mr. Cunningham that entailments are bad and all that, but you said not to worry. It takes a long time sometimes that you all would write it out together. I was slowly drying up. That means she was slowly uh, not talking any longer. Slowly, she's closing the topic, conversation, stopping to talk, wondering what idiocy, that means like foolishness, I had committed. Entailments seemed all right enough for living room talk. I began to feel sweat gathering at the edges of my hair. Only see, as long as she was freely talking, she was not frightened. Only when she looked at the people around, she started to sweat. I could stand anything but a bunch of people looking at me. They were quite still. See, all the men standing and looking, and that gave her little fear. Like, what's the matter? I asked. Atticus said nothing. I looked around and up at Mr. Cunningham, whose face was equally impassive means expressionless. He was not showing any expression, angry, sad, happy, nothing. Then he did a peculiar thing. What he did immediately, he squatted down and took me by both shoulders. So he lifted the girl. I'll tell him you said hi, little lady, he said. Then he straightened up and waved a big paw. Let's clear out, he called. Let's get going, boys. So the tension movement eased because of this girl's conversation. And that rough man, angry man, he spoke softly to the girl and he said, okay, I'll tell. He said all the men to leave the place. As they had come in ones and twos, the men shuffled, that means getting into the stuffing themselves into the car, back into their ramshackle cars, that means not maintained well cars. Doors slammed very hard, they closed. Engines coughed. Old, if a car is not maintained well, the engine, when they start, it will leave out smoke. And they were gone. I turned to Atticus, but Atticus had gone to the jail and was leaning against it with his face to the wall. I went to him and pulled his sleeve. Can we go home now? He nodded, produced his handkerchief, gave his face a going over, and blew his nose violently. Mr. Finch? A soft, husky voice came from the darkness above. They gone? Atticus stepped back and looked up. They have gone, he said. Get some sleep. Get some sleep, Tom. They won't bother you anymore. So, a small scene, the innocent girl, her childish talk, how it is the tense situation. Now, number the statements in the order that the instances occur in the story. Number one, Atticus was reading. He was sitting propped against the front door. Number two, men came out of four dusty cars and stopped in front of the jail. Number three, the children ran to Tyndall's hardware door. Number four, the men asked Atticus to move away from the door. Number five, Scout ran to Atticus. Number six, Atticus asked the children to go home. Number seven, Scout addressed Mr. Cunningham. Number 8, the men left. Number 9, Jem, Jill, and Scout started their journey back home. Number 10, Atticus told Tom that the men had left and he doesn't have to worry anymore. So, read and learn the meaning for each word that's given in each page, and we'll write the book exercise in the next class. Have a good day, children. Bye.